Everyone loves Beth Dutton, but was Alexandra the original version?
Would anyone else prefer to think of Timothy Dalton in the movie with Fran Drescher rather than as creepy Whitfield?
We know Spencer was coming home to take names, but did it have to take the whole season?
Womp womp. How many bad things can happen in one season of a show?
Another wave of the Dutton legacy is in the books. Red and Red Real Review saves the ranch, Season 2 of Paramount Plus's 1923.
Ahoy, ladies! I didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor?
Randall, look at eye contact. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Been staring at this board for days.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Act. Bears eat beets. My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I am the one who knocks.
Bears beets Battlestar Galactica.
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh my god. The microchip has been compromised.
Dracarys.
Welcome back. We had a little bit of a double dose release of shows to cover, and the second of which was one that took place almost 2 years, at least a year and a half since the first season, and that is 1923. So Red and Red Real Reviews is jumping right into that. The second season, which also happens to be the final season. And this, it's a pre-story, but now this section of the Dutton legacy is complete. So we've got to tell the audience, especially those that know the Dutton story, should they watch season 2 of 1923?
I think since it was the final and just the second season, I think it's worth watching. However, I'm going to have two disclaimers here. The first disclaimer is that I'm going to be honest, it was sort of a bummer to watch. You know, everything that could go wrong went wrong this season. So just be conscious of the fact that there will be very few happy moments to live off of. And second, my disclaimer is, if you already think that we have a problem in our society now where we're all desensitized to stuff in film and shows, you might want to skip it. I found a lot of parts mildly upsetting and graphic, and I fast forwarded a little bit. So, you know, especially right from the jump with the first episode, like that just had stuff in it that I didn't think needed to be shown at all. Like it could have been implied or whatever. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I have a hot take about some of the things that were shown. But yeah, that would be my disclaimer. You know, honestly, if you kind of get upset or you get you know, mildly thrown by watching disturbing scenes like that, then I would say avoid it.
There's definitely content in this season that could make someone very, very squeamish. I think maybe it might help people to look at it in the sense of the era it's set in.
Yeah.
Because was obviously a different world back then.
Yeah, and again, I want to talk about that later, but yeah, it's just I would kind of give that disclaimer to people if they're thinking about watching, but yeah, I mean, otherwise, it's written by Taylor Sheridan. It's a nice show to watch, especially if you love kind of westerns, you love old stuff like that.
Old stuff like that.
Old stuff.
The themes I thought that were paramount going into it, or at least like we had expectations, or the things that maybe start to grow as the season progressed. One was the anticipation of Spencer's return, which really, I don't necessarily think that this was anything that should have been unexpected, that it was going to take the duration, if not the majority, if not the entire duration of the season to complete. So that was something that kind of kept me a little bit more engaged on this, because I'm expecting this big climactic return of Spencer.
Sort of reminded me when you were talking about that, reminded me of Daenerys Targaryen with Game of Thrones. Remember how
Yeah.
that first big journey that she took, it literally took like what, 2 seasons or something like that. So yeah, the fact that it took Spencer a whole duration of the second season to get to his family's ranch, that was kind of funny. Like it just really stretched it out. It was a journey, definitely a journey, like the Odyssey.
To the point where you could almost argue it started at the end of the first season because
Oh yeah.
he and Alex were already on the
Yeah.
trek when they were separated. So
Hmm.
I could almost, I said duration of the first season. I could almost say it bled in from the first season.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a full season that it took, and we only got, I don't know, was it the last 45 minutes of the episode, last half hour of the episode, the
Yeah.
finale that he was in?
Yeah, we I don't necessarily want to use the term slow burn, but we definitely had to have a bit of patience in the big climax.
Yeah, because it was a lot. Once Spencer showed his face at the Dutton Ranch, it was a lot. A lot
Yeah.
happened in a short amount of time.
The other notion that I think is something that grew throughout this season, and it was something that started a little bit the first season, is Whitfield is a very, very creepy man but his power kind of eludes that to the public, to the rest of the characters. So I think that probably plays a factor in a growing sense of hatred the audience has for him.
Yeah, they did a lot to build up what a freak he is, and we can talk about that later too. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely going to be a bit more unboxed, but just the fact that it was, I guess, in terms of a storytelling technique, that growth of a hatred towards the antagonist.
yeah, they really want you to hate him and to see how cold and how terrible he is.
And we're gonna hop on this more in a moment, but I also had the anticipation in my head of seeing the story play out and trying to piece together the dots of which Duttons have a connection to the Duttons we know,
Right.
knowing that there's going to be another generation in between them. So like trying to like connect the dots when I know the puzzle's not really even fully imagined yet.
Right, like trying to put the branches of the family tree together to figure
Yeah.
out who's who and who is whose grandfather, father, etc.
Which is funny to think of it in terms of the family tree. It's almost like we've already got the root, we've got some of the trunk, and we've got the flowers and the twigs and the branches, but we don't have like the big boughs of the tree. So it's like we've got all this out here and this right here and nothing in the middle.
You gotta love prequels for that reason.
Yeah. So on that point, it is of course a prequel. So and to me, I can't necessarily I got this so much in 1883, and I don't necessarily think it was fully realized in the first season of 1923. But I'm also, maybe it's just my own like starting to get closer to John's birth. I'm starting to like be more attentive towards parallels to Yellowstone, and some of them are quite subtle. But any real fan of the Duttons, of which we both are, can pick these out a little bit. So the first one I kind of want to start of. There were a few moments where Alex gave me some Beth vibes.
Huh, interesting.
So I mean, what do you want to like unbox this one a little bit?
I mean, I didn't get Beth vibes from Alex. I mean, she's a lot more prim and proper than I think Beth is, but she does have the ability to assert herself. That
Right.
situation when she got the go ahead from the doctor, she kind of or the agent or whoever was trying to get her through the to come into the country, customs agent or whoever it was. She manipulated him in a way where she asserted herself to get the stamp of approval. And unlike Beth, she's pretty polite while she's asserting herself. Beth would have like slapped that guy in the face or something. So, I mean, I do think she's a little more buttoned up, we'll call it, than Beth. But when she snapped with the situation with beating the man on the train with the teapot or whatever it was, she did snap in true Beth fashion, because Beth is one of those people that if you're on her good side, she'll do anything for you. She'll lay down and die for you. But if you're on her bad side, you better watch out, and you better be very, very afraid, because she will cut you.
and I think that is the crux of my comparison. It's not so much the packaging, because obviously the packaging is very, very different, but it is those moments of she knows what she has to do to get what she wants, and maybe she's not as much of a bull in the china shop, but she knew exactly how to play that immigration officer's card to get him to kind of back off his high and mighty perch that he was sitting on, and thinking like, oh, if these pretty immigrant ladies want to get in, they're gonna have to beg me to get me to stamp their papers. And she kind of like spun him on his top, and made him go back in his corner. And then of course the scumbag on the train, where she just like, it just was nice proper Alex, and then vicious the next second.
And you know what? Another parallel I just thought of, which I didn't realize this before, I didn't put the pieces together, but at the end, when Cara is saying that she wants to meet Alex, Jacob, obviously has met her, so he's like, she's a wild Mustang, or he says something like that. Kind of insinuating that she's not unlike Cara. So I thought that was funny, but the word he used, Mustang, call me crazy, but didn't Beth drive a Mustang?
No, it wasn't I can't remember I don't think it was a Mustang, though. It was like a Lamborghini or Ferrari or something like that. I don't think it was
something that high class. Wasn't it it wasn't like a Dodge Charger.
The Bentley. It was a Bentley. I think it was a Bentley.
Oh, maybe it was a Bentley, but wouldn't that be crazy if it were a Mustang?
It would be, but I don't. That's not. That's not a muscle car type. She's a high class fast car driver.
I mean, I guess they're both like untamed horses in a way.
Yes. Oh yeah. The parallels there, especially as we try to figure out the bloodline. There's definitely something to his Jacob's choice of words there. What's one for you? What's one parallel for you?
I guess just obviously the house that Cara and Jacob live in is the Dutton family house. Like that's same. It's the same ranch that John Dutton lives in. So yeah, just seeing them in the house and walking around in the house and doing all the things in the house is just a constant reminder of Yellowstone and everything.
And actually, now that you say that, I think of that one scene where they're in the dining room, and Jacob says, "This is the first time the table's been filled since before the war."
Yeah.
I think implying that, that Spencer wasn't home back then, whatever the case may be. And that always made me think of John's constant gripe that nobody ever showed up for meals at the same time. So that also kind of, I kind of get that a little bit from the dining room in the house.
Remember in Yellowstone at one point, Monica was living there with Tate and Casey, so everyone was kind of at the table at one point, and then I think Beth and John were fighting or something, so it kind of split them up from having those family dinners, or someone got pissed off, so they stopped having the family dinners, and then it was like, okay, we're not going to eat at this table anymore, we're going to eat at the other table. Or it was, being upset from John's death, at the very, very end, they're like, we can't eat at this table anymore without thinking of him, so like, we're going to eat at the other one. So yeah, it's kind of funny that for them, in the olden times, it's going into the reverse where it was empty. Now it's a full table, and it's going to stay that way for a little bit.
Yeah. And, and to that point, to that moment, from the Yellowstone we know, I think that may have been the scene where they're all sitting down and that was when Beth and Summer had their little spat, and then
Yeah.
so they were finally sitting down, and then of course like oh there they go off to fight.
Yeah, it's like this nice dinner gets disturbed, and it's just like, okay, we're divided again.
Yeah, the bull in the china shop reveals her head again.
Yeah.
What I thought was kind of, I guess, tertiary in the sense of the word, but the train station, the the quote unquote train station, was always an underlying subplot throughout Yellowstone, and I feel like we saw that it for the first time in its realization, and it wasn't even a concept put forth by the Duttons. It was put forth by Whitfield. He told Banner to dump one of his sex girls off the edge, and he used the same quote: "No county, no judge, and no jury of your peers." I am positive. I don't remember if it was John, Rip, maybe Jamie, whoever said it. Like
Mm.
I'm positive that quote was uttered in Yellowstone, and just the fact that like I'm now almost wondering like, okay, wait, if the train station was a Dutton thing, why the heck was it originated from Whitfield? But at the same time, just to see like that moment of the train station having roots in these earlier stories was kind of an also a little subtlety to me.
I didn't realize there was that connection there, but you know what it could be is it doesn't necessarily have a connection to Whitfield. It could be that anyone in Bozeman or whatever town they're in, if they want to get rid of someone, they all know to do that. And obviously it's a secret, so they're not telling each other that they're doing it, but everyone's dumping bodies down there.
It's like the people in high school that sleep around, but everyone knows they sleep around, but nobody talks about it.
Exactly. It's the unspoken secret that nobody talks about. So they're all using it because it's like a black hole where nothing comes of it, and you could just use it at your leisure, you know?
That almost makes you wonder, like, do the authorities turn a blind eye to its usage? If
Oh,
everybody knows
definitely.
about if everybody knows about it, then you'd think the sheriff's department would know about it too.
Well, not everybody, just everyone who's trying to get rid of someone or has gotten rid of, like
Yeah,
someone who literally knows where the bodies are buried.
yeah, quite literally, in fact.
Yeah.
You got what? You got another one for a parallel?
Um, So I had two other ones. So the first one was we had the narrating from Elsa, who's, an ancestor, a Dutton ancestor speaking from the grave. And then, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about Elsa's little pearls of wisdom after.
Yeah,
And then obviously just the land struggles remind me of Yellowstone, fighting
yeah,
over land.
yeah, and oh, to the point where when Whitfield's sitting in front of that council and he's selling them on the ski resorts and the tourism,
Mm,
and we'll build an airport where the plane that they show this like early American
hmm.
primitive version of an airplane where it takes 24 hours to fly across the country or whatever. Um, like so, like that's exactly what the deal was with I want to say Eversource, but that's not it. the investment firm that Jamie's kind of trying to play
Oh,
both
yeah.
sides with. Um, like it's almost exactly one to one the situation that John was trying to fight, and here Whitfield is selling it to all these billionaires to invest in this tourism resort through the Yellowstone.
Yeah, that was the exact same things that the entertainment that Whitfield was advocating for was exactly the same as in the present time with Yellowstone. And I mean, even, we'll talk a little bit more about the finale in depth, but even just the fact that when Whitfield kind of met his demise,
Hmm.
Jacob says, I want you to go out in a way where you're talked about in school books
Yes.
that this happened. And like basically that we stood our ground against you, who are this terrible man who's trying to come in and erase everything we find beautiful about where we live.
Which I almost find ironic, probably not the right word, but there was a scene before Spencer found Alex where
Mm.
he's talking to the little boy on the train, and the little
Yep.
boy's talking about the escapades of Custer and how he was a good guy, and
Hmm.
Spencer says, "Well, don't believe everything you read in your textbooks." So the comparison of that to Jacob's final testament, so to speak, to Whitfield is almost kind of like a contradictory, maybe.
I
The
would
way the
I would
school
call it
books tell history.
poetic. Like
Yeah,
it was poetic that they were that scene with the little boy was poetic, we read things in our history books and that's the truth. That's what happened. If we read it in the book, it must have happened that way. And
mhm,
Spencer was an example of that, where he was there and he fought in the war and he realizes like that's not how it happened really.
yeah, yeah. So then for Jacob to do the whole like read about you in school books, that kind of felt like a well, we're gonna craft the history the way we want it to be told.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other one I had was actually something that I didn't pick up from season one, but you kind of raised my eyebrow to it off
Mm.
there. Is Tiona, the Crow girl? She's on the run from this Marshall Kent, who's kind of, I don't think not necessarily to the same level of Whitfield, but pretty darn close. We have the audience built a hatred for him, and
Mm.
he's this like just no nonsense kind of a bigot, on the road, just on the run, just chasing down this girl because of whatever story is in his head of her misdeeds
Mm.
with that churchyard. And you raised my attention that she's mentioned as a rainwater. So there we have another parallel to Yellowstone. Obviously, Tom Rainwater was the principal chief of the reservation.
Right. So this comes just from my obsession with IMDb and always pulling up IMDb when I'm gonna right before I'm gonna start a new show and keeping it up throughout the duration of the show so that I can go back and look at things. And of course, if you see the cast laid out, you see all their names, first and last names. And it did say, I don't know if it's Tiana or Tiona, but yeah, it said Tiona Rainwater. So I'm like, oh, I know that name. She's definitely a descendant of the Rainwater that we know.
Yeah. So your uncovering of that is more due to your obsession with having the internet open at all times versus hearing it in the show.
Yeah, but I don't think they said it in the show really until the end. I mean, as far as the first season goes, I really don't remember. They did say it obviously when they were in court at the end,
Yeah,
but I don't know that they would have said it in the first season. And maybe that was kind of they
yeah,
wanted the audience to realize like maybe it was sort of a surprise or like a shocker to be like, "Oh, she's a rainwater."
yeah. I don't remember it from the first season either. I do remember it being mentioned throughout this season before the court scene at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
was brought up a
possible.
couple times.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously it was, I mean, I just happened to see it initially, like right before I started even watching this season. So I was able to tip you off to that. Like, just so you know,
Yeah,
she's a rainwater.
yeah. And there's some moments in this season where you could see Tom Rainwater in her because
Mm,
she's the opinions of when she's on the run with Pete and the elder fellow that he says he's just her father, but I don't
mm,
necessarily know whether he is or if that was just like a elder statesman. Your ICU is my father now or something. Um, but when they were talking about running away, and she's like, "There's nothing behind us. The white man's
mm.
destroyed our land, our traditions, that sort of thing." And he convinces her. He doesn't necessarily say it directly, but he kind of very subtly suggests her to, if we run away, like we're worried about, our land being gone, our history being gone. If we run away, then it will be gone because there will be no one to teach the later generations of what life was like.
Mm.
And then on top of that, there's she has kind of this resentment because of that but to the point where she's like, what are they? They're like, they don't know how to live with the land, and like, who's going to teach them when the land takes it back? Because I think he was saying something about how the cycle will come back around, and then things will kind of reset themselves. And he's like, it's kind of our responsibility to teach them how to live with the land. And she's has this like resentment that Rainwater always had, where she's like, if they're destroying and they took it all from us, what do we care if the land destroys them? If they destroy, like, at that point, it's all a wash. So I almost kind of see a lot of Rainwater's parallels in his predecessor.
Yeah, and even the moment where she is feeling really down. I mean, that's an understatement after Pete gets killed, and she's kind of like, I have nothing to fight for anymore.
Right.
Then you quickly realize that, like, after that next scene where the priest comes looking for her, is tiptoeing around, and her father sees him, gets killed, and then she's got to fight for her life. But it's crazy that like, she's obviously literally fighting for her life, but what comes from that is the situation in court where the marshal just tells her, like, get out of here, like, just go somewhere else, please.
My time.
so she's and then that Native American guy, that I think he's a marshal also, that works with the female marshal, or like an investigator. I don't know what he is exactly, but he's pretty nice to her, and he's like, just go somewhere else where, like, you don't have such terrible memories. So I think that was in Texas that all took place, correct?
When they were running her down, I think they were pretty far south. Then they had to bring her back for the court case. And then he suggested her go to California.
Right. So, I mean, we know obviously that Rainwater is the chief in Montana or Wyoming?
Montana. But
Montana.
There's definitely going, I mean, whatever the next era of
chapter,
Dutton it's gonna be. There's obviously, she's gonna be back, and she's gonna have to meet somebody, because I mean, we saw a little flirtatious behavior between her and Pete, but I don't necessarily know if they were ever intimate. So she's gonna at some point have to meet somebody that winds up being the next generation between her and Tom Rainwater.
Right. And it took that situation of her having to be cast out of that town in Texas or wherever it was, for her to find her way to the area where, she establishes her people, and that's where Rainwater as a descendant is born.
Yeah. So the other thing with this season is there's I think you insinuated it right off the top of the show, there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, icky moments. There's a lot of the heavy emotions construed to that. And we'll start it off, since we're just talking about Tiana. Speaking of Kent, his bigotry is kind of always on display in this one. So that's kind of the first thing that's kind of like maybe an uneasy topic that they touch on here. The fact that there's still that sense of colonialism in terms of how Kent sees the natives, even though it was their land, it was their country.
Right. Yeah, that just stereotype, or that thinking of they're dirty people and they're disgusting and despicable, and just, everything they do is disgusting, and just that innate hatred.
Yeah, I think they used the term mongrel several times. So
I was literally going to say that.
Yeah, and that was it was also then, it kind of felt like a bit of a fitting vengeance of sorts in that final scene, where you have the priest who almost has this sense of forgiveness, where he knows Kent's off his rocker, so he takes him out, but then he's still convinced in his head that Tiana is the proverbial bad guy, and he's got to end her. He's got to send her till salvation. He's like, beg for salvation before God or whatever. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that because, I didn't do anything wrong. This was all self-defense. And and of course he runs out of ammo, and she winds up having her chance to kill him. So there was just this kind of like arc of vengeance for not just her situation, but a little bit of comeuppance for the global environment.
Yeah, that scene was hard to watch kind of with the priest. He was basically like saying a final prayer and was like, "Okay, now it's your turn. Like I'm trying to save you or something before I kill you," basically. And
Yeah.
that was hard to watch, adding in the fact that Tiona's just bawling and she's like scared. She's trying to fight back. She's just got like boogers like streaming down her face as she's crying. So that was, I mean, hard to watch in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, now that we've got that one out of the way, let's move on to like the really meatier things that were hard to watch at
Oof.
times. One, of course, is the plight of Alex's journey. She's trying desperately to get back to Spencer. She has no idea where he is or what path he's taking to get back to Montana. She just knows that he's headed back to Montana. So, I mean, this is a huge range. There's we touched on it a little before with the interaction with the immigration officer. Before that, there's a very uncomfortable examination where I don't necessarily know if the doctors were intentionally being creepy or they probably just examined so many people that they're just cold to it all. So, but regardless of that, I mean, they're so cold that they don't realize the humiliation they're putting her through in the examination room. And then he notices that she's pregnant, so we're thinking like, oh, okay, that could be an issue later. She finally gets by that. She gets tips on how to get on the train. She gets assaulted in the bathroom. That was rough to watch. There was to me, there was almost an implication in that she had a miscarriage. Like I thought the baby was lost.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder too, all of what she's been through. She was so stressed that could have caused a miscarriage on its own, just her being stressed. And I actually started to have anxiety throughout it because just with everything that was happening to her, it was so terrible. So I would anticipate and get anxious about little indications that something else was going to go wrong. For example, there was just that creepy guy watching her in the train station. So you're like, oh, great. What do we have next? Like, and it just got to be where, and actually I thought that bathroom scene was going to turn out to be a lot worse than it was. And that's again, an understatement because it's like she got, beat so bad. I thought
a rape instead of a assault.
Yeah, we'll say grape so they don't censor us. But I thought that was going to go a lot worse, and my mind was always racing, anticipating what bad thing was going to happen to her next.
Yeah. Which there's one that kind of pales in comparison to those situations, but also stems from that. She has this interaction with this young mother on the train, and there at one point it almost seems like they're kind of bonding, even if it's in a more of a testy sense, where she kind of has it's like you're used to coming from England where you're royalty or whatever, and here if you don't make it you got to marry it or you got to steal it. And then of course when they get to I was gonna say Sioux Falls, I don't even think they're in the Dakotas yet. I think they're still in Chicago, because that's where she met that couple.
Right.
But she confronts this young mother getting off the train when she steals her tips while she was working on the train. So okay, you see this kind of bond forming, but this woman still tries to take advantage of Alex at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was just like how many, for me, it was like how many bad things could happen to one person? Just like this is getting ridiculous almost, you know?
Yeah, and the biggest of which of those bad things, or maybe the kind of climax in its own right of those bad
Mm,
things were, how she was getting those tips. She was working on the train so she could eat
yeah.
because she at this point she's probably famished, as well as
Mm,
the baby she's carrying is famished.
right.
And she has this instance where she has this very nice interaction with this young couple, and then there's this sleazy guy on the
Mm,
train too, and they have the moment where she kind of spills the tea, and he kind of does a little the creepy thing where he makes her pat it up off his lap, and
yeah.
then the next morning she comes out for breakfast and she's pouring his coffee, and he reaches up and gropes her, and that's of course the one that's probably the most climactic moment of her kind of plight.
Yeah, I was really disturbed by that scene. I mean, even the examination scenes with the doctors, there
Mhm.
was two doctors that examined her. And then what started it all for me was the first episode with the scene with Spencer rescuing his shipmate who was being assaulted.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Yep,
And
that's right.
like with all of these events, I do think that there were ways that it could have been either implied or it could have been like maybe you just see, in that scene with on the train, for example, maybe you just see Alex talking with the guy and it's inaudible, and then you see kind of the reaction on her face or something, and then they cut away, and then she beats him with the teapot, and then the police or the people on the train are asking her, what the hell happened, and she's like, he was assaulting me, like, like we don't as a viewer have to see it, and that's kind of where my hot take comes in. Like I get like fired up about it because so we were talking about how this stuff happened back in the day. Of course,
Mhm.
things like this have been happening since the days of the Vikings and in Jesus's time. Since the beginning of time, we know assault and we know violence. We know all of this stuff goes on. But like, why, in my mind, do we have to have shows that are packed with these graphic scenes? Like, Whitfield's creepy sex acts. We have the scene with Spencer's friend getting assaulted. Like, why do we have to have those repetitive graphic scenes? Like, historically, I know it's a thing, and I'll give the show Outlander as an example of that. They have, obviously, like, this takes place in like the 1700s when it starts off, but like they have multiple characters in Outlander that have been assaulted as many as 3 to 4 times each. Like, I'm not even joking. And like we know it's a realistic thing that happens. It still happens. Like, we know it does. But why, for storytelling, do we need to see the actual assault? Like, it's disturbing. Why do we need to watch that as humans?
I mean, I would agree. There's a very high level of disturbance to that, but I mean, it's also could be the actors. That's a moment, as disturbing as it may be. That's a moment for the actors to sell their ability as an actor too. If they could pull off something that disturbing and have it be disturbing to the audience. So there's also that element of it as well. If it's more subtle and you see one guy around the corner and then next thing you know it's a conversation between two other parties, then there's no visual evidence to the audience that it happened. So it kind of not necessarily the whole he said she said thing, but it kind of gives more credence to the victim in that scenario from the actors from the actor's portrayal.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it's a sign of the times or something because I remember several years ago there was an assault scene with Sansa in Game of Thrones where
Hmm.
she gets married to Ramsay Bolton or
Ramsey
something,
Bolton, yeah.
or was it Joffrey? I mean, I know that there were a lot of disturbing scenes with Joffrey abusing people, but there was a scene in particular that a lot of people were outraged about because it was just very disturbing. But like, why is that a thing where it needs to be shown in these times? Because I feel like my dad loves watching Westerns, these old, boring, black and white John Wayne type of movies. Yeah. And I just feel like we're so far to the other side of it. Like back in old Hollywood movies, like they wouldn't show anything that was even like slightly scandalous like that. You know, they wouldn't, and like the stuff was in the not so distant past at that point, and they still didn't show that stuff. So why are we showing it now? Like, why do we need to show it now?
From that standpoint, it's actually a very interesting discussion, because you have back then in the John Wayne era where media were very limited and you only had a handful of stations, but everyone had access to them. So you could argue everyone has access to them. Children have the opportunity to always be exposed to it. So
true.
People probably needed to be a little bit more conscious of limiting that type of material. Whereas now there's a lot more controls on it, but the media is also everywhere. There's thousands of different media outlets, and as much as you have the controls to limit it, that just the sheer amount of platforms there are, there's no way you're going to limit it all. And of course, the internet is the internet. You know, an inquisitive child's still going to find a way to find content that may be that's concerning, disturbing, not age appropriate, whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like, okay, so it was more controlled back then, but it was a fewer amount of platforms that everyone had access to. Versus now, it's not as controlled, but there's so much content that things will get lost, but they also could be found easier.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, to me, it's like not just about children. Like, why do I, as a 38-year-old woman, want to see this disturbing stuff? You know, it's just, I'll say I fast forwarded through several of the scenes with Whitfield. It's just, when I forget the other woman's name that they kind of brought in and were like torturing her, but
the newer one.
Seeing that stuff is just really like it goes beyond like pornographic scenes. It's just like on another level, and it's just like, okay, I don't need to see that stuff to get the picture that Whitfield is a freak and he's a creep. Like he's a sexual deviant, but like, I don't need to see that shit.
And that is the last moment of the uncomfortable scenes in this season were Whitfield's kind of kinks, for lack of a better word. And just the fact that maybe it was my own ignorance, but like I saw Timothy Dalton's name in the credits. I'm like, oh, I know Timothy Dalton, it's James Bond. But, you know, not really having watched those Bond films, I didn't recognize him as like that Whitfield was Timothy Dalton. And then it was almost kind of like, it's like you have this guy, this actor portraying this really creepy, disturbing guy, and in another life he was one of the cinematic heroes of on-screen history in James Bond.
But think of how James Bond was always a womanizer. So you know what I mean? Like it's not that far of a jump, I guess. But it's funny because when you wrote in the deck that Timothy Dalton, like the first thing you associated with him was James Bond, I had to think about it, and I was like, oh yeah, he was one of the James Bonds, like back in the day, like when Sean Connery was. But that, I didn't think of that. Like, ironically, what I think of him as is there was this like rom-com in like 1997 with Fran Drescher, believe it or not, and Timothy Dalton. It's called The Beautician and the Beast, where she's like this, you know, like over the top, like getting her nails done, like, ha ha. And he's like this guy who's kind of like rough around the edges, but then like they end up falling in love. And so that's what I ended up thinking of with him when I saw his face. And, honestly, I prefer to think of him in that movie than in this movie in this show where he's just a total
Would think
freak.
so. I would think
Yeah.
so.
So I just kept trying to think of that. I'm like, think of Fran Drescher, think of Fran Drescher.
Yeah, the nanny, the nanny, the nanny, the nanny.
As I'm fast forwarding, think of Fran
Yeah.
Drescher, think of Fran Drescher.
um, yeah, I mean, it just goes back to that, like, building up the hatred for the character, but those,
Mm.
from like what he was doing, and like then also the way he would describe it to the girls, as far as like this fine line between pain and pleasure, it's kind of like, ooh. So not only is it hard to watch, it's just kind of like there's like that underlying note of evil at the same time.
And obviously, they're sort of, I don't want to say tricked, but they're sort of manipulated into thinking it's something different, like, oh, here's a way to earn money or something to these prostitutes or women
Hmm.
of the night. And then it's like they're just brought in and they're like, oh, it's just going to be easy money. Like, you're going to do what you do normally. And then it's just like they're torturing them.
And at the same time, there was one point where he mentioned an ulterior motive. Like at one, when it starts out, you just think, oh, he's just got these, like, freaky kinks, and wants to
Right.
cause the girls pain or whatever, and then bang them. But there was also one moment where he's saying, like, he's referring to the one girl, Libby, I think her name was.
Yeah.
He was referring to her ability in what he was asking her to do,
Mm.
and he says something along the lines of, she's going to be very useful with, like, politicians. So he's already, it's not necessarily just this, like, weird kink with him. It's also, he wants to use them to gain power.
They're just literally pawns on his little chessboard of life.
Yeah, little chessboard of creep. A little bit of a lighter topic, not so much funny, but there's pearls of wisdom in this one, and you noted it as some of this coming from Elsa's narration. I thought that some of it was coming from Cara. That's where kind of like most of the ones I wrote down came from.
Oh, the moments of wisdom. Yeah. I mean, for
Yeah.
me, I mean, I think I don't know if I noted down anything that Cara said, but for me, just the way Elsa was interjecting every once in a while, like everything she was saying had some profound nature to it, but I felt like I just couldn't take it seriously because her voice is just ridiculous. Like,
So it still bothered you?
it still bothered me. It's just the like, well, mothers aren't supposed to do like that, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I just can't take it seriously. Like, even if what she's saying is profound, I remember the scene of Alex in the room on the train with the single mother and the two kids, and I think the mother asks Alex at one point, oh, well, can you steal them some bread, or can you steal them something, like, can you see what you can get? And Alex says, sure, I'll see what I can get. But then they kind of go to sleep, and Elsa starts talking about being a mother and how you have to do whatever it takes, and all of that. And what she was saying was definitely a good message. It was just like, I can't take her accent seriously. I just can't.
I didn't get that, and I'll call it your Bass Reeves impersonation. Followers of the show
No, that
know.
was different.
Well, that's what it sounds like when you say it.
No, Bass Reeves is that's different.
You sound like you're doing the same impersonation. I'm sorry.
I'm not great
Anyway.
with impersonations.
Anyway, I don't necessarily remember what her narration sounded like, or her character, I guess, really, in 1883. But in this one, I didn't get that big drawl in this season. I didn't when I heard her narration, I didn't get the drawl from Elsa on that one.
She has kind of a lower voice than most women have, so that's why I would just put it down in the like deep register with like a little bit of the when they say like S's, it's like shh instead of S.
Well, being from Connecticut and we don't pronounce our soft T's and D's. We are not
Right.
necessarily the ones to judge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no dialect expert for sure, but yeah, it's just I wanted to, look at those moments as being full of wisdom, but
Mhm.
I don't know, I had a hard time like separating the two.
Yeah. Well, to me, the ones that were full of wisdom, a couple of them from Kara, and she
Mm,
had this talk with Elizabeth, and I think this is not when Elizabeth has those first moments where she wants to get off the ranch,
mm,
but a little bit later after that, and Elizabeth wondering why they're living in this time of advancement where the plane has become a thing and the automobile is becoming more commonplace, and she's wondering like why there's still this primitive nature of mankind. And Karis basically says we're still animals. We just have more in common with wolves than rabbits.
mm.
Like, and to me, like even looking at that in a modern, in like a today's sense, that's still not necessarily we're still not necessarily any more advanced now than we were then. And she even likens it to something of the Kara has, at multiple points, references her her devotion to faith, and she's
Mm.
like quotes them out of the Ten Commandments, like don't live, don't kill, don't covet. Doesn't seem that hard, and she says covet seems to be the most important one. Land, women, wealth, man will
Mm.
covet himself out of existence. And I think like that's also something where that really hasn't changed either, because you know there's still a lot of people in the world even today that still covet what the other one has.
Oh yeah. That's comparison and wanting things and greed and stuff like that is still such a major
Yeah,
issue today.
and like and it's and like to the point where like people don't know where the line is to not cross. Like it's okay to want something better for yourself, better for your family, that sort of thing. But like people get to a certain point where they just blow past the wall they should stop at, and it gets to the point of taking as opposed to just acquiring.
Right, and you could argue too that the whole social media culture too makes us covet things more,
Hmm.
like tenfold than back in 1923.
It can, yeah, it can. Sometimes I argue people like, well, look at your bank account first, and it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't cover it today. Maybe wait a week, a month, a year, whatever.
Yeah, it's just a main thing where people very much live beyond their means.
Yes, yeah. And the other one was Zane is part of the group of cowboys that's
Hmm.
defending the ranch. And he notices Kara's kind of already like two steps ahead of him, and she's already got her own rifle and she's ready to do the
Hmm.
same. I think at this point she's sitting on the front porch, and Zane says to her like, "Oh, they don't make women like you anymore, ma'am." And she goes, "Yes, they do. It's the men that they make different." And
Hmm.
I feel like that's almost a parallel to modern society in the fact that they're implying that that may have been starting way back then, where traditional masculine tendencies and masculine behaviors were being forced out of society one way or the other.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like we've kind of come back to that where it's a problem that men are not as masculine and they're actually told not to be masculine, like, oh, toxic masculinity, if you're masculine, like, we don't want that and we don't want you.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know whether that was the intention, because liberal Hollywood, that sort of thing, but that's
Yeah,
kind of to me, interpreting from the show, that's kind of how it played out a little bit.
which is funny because nobody really treats like the concept of tomboys, women or girls who want like act a little more masculine or like wearing masculine clothes or things like that. Nobody really hates on them or chastises them for what they do. But yeah, I mean, I did like how Cara, she was just a tough broad, you know?
Yeah.
She just always was there with either a nugget of wisdom, or if she didn't know what to say, she knew what to do.
Yeah, very
Always.
to the point of at the end when Alex
Yeah, exactly.
dies and Spencer's like, I don't know what to do, and she's like, it's okay, you're not supposed to. I'll take it from
Yeah,
here. Which at,
exactly.
which at first I'm thinking was in reference to the fact that his wife just died, and I'm thinking like, oh,
Right.
you're not supposed to know what happens when your loved one dies, but she's actually talking about taking care of the baby.
Right. And which is interesting too, because she's pulling double duty basically. Like, not
Yeah.
only does she know how to be a nurturing woman, she also knows how to take a rifle and go to the roof of the house. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and when to the point when Zane even says like, "Oh, I thought it was the boys up top getting all the lucky shots," and she's like, "No, that luck was on my side, but this thing kind of takes the luck out of it."
yeah, she's just savage. And I like to think I have someone that my family knows that has met Helen Mirren and says that she's a lovely, lovely lady. And I like to think that that's just who she is, like any character she plays.
That's the British charm and a little bit of American grit.
Yeah.
So this is the end of 1923, and it went out with a bang because they made the final episode feature film length, practically.
Mm.
There is one more generation to cycle through before we get to the John Dutton we know and his children, of course. But what are some kind of things to pick out of this finale that stood out to me? One thing that was a kind of more subtle, but it was kind of a nice moment, was this mini redemption for Banner, which in season one he was just kind of this kind of like scummy guy that was a thorn in Jacob's side, and he realizes Whitfield is this creepazoid,
Mm.
and he tries to get out. He plans his escape for himself and his family, and Jacob intervenes. He said, "No, no, no! You started this shit. You're staying here. You're staying here with me." And he at least he pleads with like, well, at least let my family get out. It's like, okay, your family can get out. So the gunfight happens, and there's this moment where he sees Spencer help his wife and son onto the train.
Mm.
So he goes to shoot one of the thugs that's taking aim at Jacob. And then in doing that, he winds up taking a bullet from Sheriff McDowell, and it winds up being fatal. And then there's this kind of moment of forgiveness between Banner and Jacob, which I thought was kind of a nice closure for that arc, something that was very testy in season one.
Yeah, I really liked that. I actually didn't know his name was Banner. I kept writing the Irish guy in my notes.
This guy.
But but and he's from, I want to say he's from Game of Thrones, that actor, right? I think he's
I don't.
Game
Is
of
he
Thrones.
Braun or does he just look like
I
Braun?
I think he is. So yeah, I obviously recognize his face, but the whole time I did like the arc this season where he's sort of realizing there's that scene where Whitfield, is torturing this girl or with his sexcapades or whatever it is, and Banner kind of walks out of there like, geez, like this is
Yeah,
just
like
insane.
what did I get myself into here?
They're like about to engage in torture and they're like, okay, please close the door on your way out. And he's just like, he closes the door and he's just like, oh my God. And then he kind of
Yeah,
goes home to his wife and he's telling her how, oh, it was the comment that he said to Whitfield, like, this woman is someone's daughter. Like, he's disgusted by it, what they're
yeah,
doing to this girl. And Whitfield kind of coldly replies, like, oh, well, I would do this to her mother if given the chance, or something like that. Like something just that makes
yeah,
your blood run cold. And Whitfield after that said to his wife, Whitfield, there's something wrong with that guy. Like, he is cold as ice, and he kind of communicates his doubts. And I did like the moment with Jacob where Jacob says to him, well, you kept your word that, something was going to happen today. And then Banner kind of says something about his family, and Jacob says, okay, I'm going to help your family. And he says, you can have my word on that.
Yeah.
So like that was a nice little scene. Like if there ever was a time where I would cry, that would probably have been the one.
Which is, I mean, we know that the word is bond with the Dutton men, so.
Yeah.
eh, Like I said, I didn't cry, but the one part where I kind of like hit the feels a little bit was Spencer and Alex's reunion when she lights the car on fire and the train drives by and it just happens to be Spencer's train. He sees it and realizes it's her, and they run out and she puts like every last little fiber of energy she has in her to run him down, and he grabs her and he's thinking like well, the living's only 3 miles away. I'll just carry you, and that was the only time that kind of felt like emotionally heavy to me, is the fact that like they've been on this trek to find each other for so long, and there they are. They finally see each other again.
I think it was funny because when he said I'm going to carry you 3 miles, I'm thinking, my God. And then they're kind of joking around with each other. She kind of makes comments about him being cheeky, or I don't remember what it was, but
Yeah.
so it was kind of a light moment. Like I think where it set in for me, like the heaviness of her condition and how much she had been through, was when they got into the train and there was that good-hearted doctor that tended to her, and he literally, was having Spencer put these hot washcloths on her, and he said, I know this is, he's like, this is difficult and I know this is not ideal, but like we need to take these clothes off of her. And Spencer puts a blanket over her, and the doctor says like literally she was minutes away from death.
Yeah, which rings true when he's pulling the gloves off and her socks and you see she's gangrenous.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was rough.
That was yucky. But, obviously for me, all of the gore in this season was all like graphic. It wasn't like I didn't have a problem with the gore of the violence like I normally do with a lot of these shows. Really did not have an issue with that.
As long as it's not a slasher flick, you're good.
Like obviously the frostbite was gross,
Yeah.
that was pretty yucky, but it was nothing I couldn't handle.
Yeah. Well, things that we could always handle are seeing the Duttons kick some serious ass, and Spencer finally makes it home to the ranch, and he is a one-man wrecking crew. Cara knew he would be. The elephant gun pops that across the field, and it's funny they said like, oh, you're not going to get around a corner with an elephant gun. He said that one guy earlier, and he says, oh, you don't get around corners with this. You shoot through the wall.
Yeah.
So, and sure enough, he pops this one guy with the machine gun through the car and bounces his body off the vehicle. So then
Stupid question, but what is an elephant gun?
Shoot an elephant with it.
Is that literally
Yeah.
what it is?
Yeah, that's why it's named that way.
Oh, I thought it was funny when he took the gun from Bill, and I think Bill says something about like, I'm gonna need to deputize you, and he just ignores him and runs off. But yeah, I mean, it was funny that they kind of implied that it was kind of like a wimpy gun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, sort of.
No, well, it's probably wasn't used too often in America at that point,
Right.
because there's no elephants in America. Certainly not at that point, unless nowadays you get one in the zoo, but I mean, certainly not in the wild. So, I mean, they probably just weren't used to seeing that, and he was using them all the time. That's probably his primary source of weaponry, defense in Africa.
Right. I mean, I guess better for him to wield that weapon, because I mean, if you think about it, sheriffs back then probably did use their guns a lot, but if you think about someone like a current police, a cop, like they probably don't discharge their weapon that often.
Right. Yeah, and it probably, and even to the point of, a modern police officer, they've got their billy club, they've got their pepper spray, so they have other things to use as well besides their firearm if need
Right.
be. So back then, the sheriff, the deputies, that's probably all they had. If it got escalated, it was going to get
Yeah.
terminal.
Right. Oh yeah.
And if that wasn't enough to satisfy the action for the Yellowstone viewer, the final moment where they storm into Whitfield's house. He puts a couple rounds in Whitfield, pops Libby, the creepy sex girl that, even if she was manipulated to be that way, was at times just as creepy as Whitfield. And he kind of makes, and it's not necessarily like Spencer holds Whitfield accountable for Alex's death. It's not necessarily that he was responsible for it, but he was responsible for the events that led to Alex's death.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that he kind of has this pseudo Heisenberg moment where he makes Whitfield say her name before he puts the final bullet in his head.
Yeah, it's sort of a question like, Alex? Like, I don't know who that is. And then, yeah, and I thought it was
for me.
I thought it was kind and nice that Spencer let the other prostitute go.
Yes. Do you like to be here? I suggest you leave.
He's like, get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here, girlfriend.
Yeah, and then to your point about, where they're going to read in the history books about what happened to you, and they walk away and burning the house down. So it's like this is a super exclamation point on the downfall of Whitfield.
And like a true action movie or action sequence where cool guys don't look at explosions. They just calmly walk away as things explode behind them.
I was hoping you would sing the music video. I really did.
Oh, the cool guys don't look at explosions.
Yeah.
That was like a Will Ferrell thing, wasn't it? When he was pretending to be Neil Diamond at like the MTV Movie Awards or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know that's when it originally aired. I just saw it on YouTube sometime later.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's definitely what it's from.
Was Andy Samberg in that video too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought. Well, if you recognize us from other works on the internet and enjoy listening to our show, give us a 5-star review, please, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, where you can listen to us on those platforms, as well as iHeartRadio. But if you enjoy seeing the Ginger Greatness, check us out on YouTube and Rumble. If you've got questions, comments about the show, email us, redandredrealreviews, that is the letter N, and real spelled with 2 E's, @gmail.com. Follow our adventures on social media. She is Binge the Ginge. That is dots between the words on Instagram and all one word on TikTok. And I am Nutmeg2 Palmetto. That is the number 2 on both platforms. Next up, we are traveling to a mystical realm for another revisit. One of our faves. This time it's season 3 of The Wheel of Time on Amazon Prime or Prime Video, whatever they're calling themselves these days. Feels like forever since we watched that, so maybe the hands of time will be kind to us. Until that very next real review, Red and Red are signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
No. Why not? Do. Or do not.
Because I don't want those scrubs.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Who brought this guy along?
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this shit.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? Nothing but love for you. Nothing but love for you.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Peace! Fire, you son of a... You're dead. You crazy son of a bitch, you're dead.
Toodaloo, motherfucker. Hey,
It's not funny anymore.
Still nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.